Hi everyone, and welcome to the Haunted Connection show. So we're bringing this to you from the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre, and I keep saying it because I've just been saying it for years. The Paranormal Research Centre.
She'll get it right one day.
I will, once we get used to the new name. So,
but I might change it back before you get used to
it. Welcome to everyone. So tonight, as our guest, we've got Paul Bestall. So welcome, Paul.
Thank you for inviting me.
And we've also got our illustrious leader.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just trying to share the feed out to my wall.
Yeah, so welcome, Paul. I mean, do you want to start a little bit by telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, I suppose anybody who may know me will be from my podcast, Mysteries and Monsters, which has been running for just over 4.5 years. I'm slowly crawling up to 250 episodes since I began.
Wow.
So that's been running since March 2019 and essentially sees me speaking with authors and researchers and experiencers covering all aspects of supernatural, paranormal and ufology from around the world. And it's something that I absolutely love. It's a real passion of mine from kicking it off and you know, basically bought myself a microphone and then let it sit on a shelf for 6 months till I plucked up the courage to dive in.
Yeah. Do you find it getting easier now you've done them for a bit?
The easiest part is speaking with people. Everything else is still, and I think when I look back at how I started and where we are now, it's one of those where I just wish I'd got enough time to go back and fix all the first 80 episodes till I realized I knew what I was doing. So it's because when I started, what I knew about podcasting you could write on the back of a postage stamp.
Yeah.
Now it's probably about a slightly larger postage stamp, but I still know a lot more. Yeah. It's not as stressful as it was. It is a lot easier in regards to I know how it works and what to do and how to make it flow now. But yeah, the conversations are the easy bit. It's just the bum-numbing monotony of clearing up coughs and sniffs and things as you do it.
I suppose over the years you've heard some fantastic stories from people, because no two people are ever going to be the same, are they? And no two people really are ever going to have the same experiences. So you must have heard some fantastic stories over your time.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've been very fortunate to speak with some people who have experienced and encountered hairy cryptids in North America, which is obviously a big passion of mine. I'm obsessed with all kinds of tall, hairy creatures from around the world, from Bigfoot and Sasquatch to the Yeti and the Yowie and the Orang Pendek. So they are always fascinating. Obviously, being stuck here in the UK, I'm insanely jealous of anybody that goes researching in the Pacific Northwest. But then I've also had the honor of speaking with 2 or 3 alien abductees, Calvin Parker, Terry Lovelace, Kaz Clark. So it is very interesting, both for me and for the listeners, I suppose, because I used to be quite skeptical about a lot of things, even though I'm a believer, but I'm one of those people, I've got a foot in both camps. And I think what I thought I knew and what I believed 5 years ago is simply not compatible to where I am today. So, yeah, I have had a couple of conversations that have given me sleepless nights, I have to say, when I've spoken to these people.
Really? And of course, you're on here tonight because you are a speaker, a guest speaker at this year's ParaMeet. So, are you looking forward to it?
It's a wonderful mix of fear and excitement, Neil.
That's a bit like me there. That's a bit down the tip.
But I was deeply humbled to be invited, I have to say. So I'm just hoping that I can match the bar of the quality of some of the other speakers that you've got on over the weekend and you've had previously, and don't annoy enough people to make sure I never get invited back. I think I'm not planning to.
So are you busy planning your talk, or is it already sorted?
I'm fine tuning it because I basically I'm bouncing. I've got 2 topics and I've sort of done 2, and I've just got to decide which one I want to focus on the most. So it's I've got to decide really, and I just I'm not sure. They're both paranormal based, but it's just a question of do I deal with people or pets?
I imagine dealing with pets is easier than dealing with people.
Well,
no, that's just living people.
Well, true. My dog tends to listen to me most times.
Yeah.
Can't say much for the cats though.
So, have you done anything like this before? Any speaking before to the public?
Not in this realm, no. I've got a very boring day job where I work for one of the largest companies in the UK. So I've done a lot of presentations in regards to pensions, which I don't really think would go down very well at ParaMeet. No. And I'm not financially qualified, so I won't be able to give anybody any sort of financial advice. But if they want to know about pensions and savings, I'll be more than happy to bore them, if they so wish. But and I've done bits and bats in that regard, and a few other things. So it's I'm looking forward to it. I mean, obviously, I've done public speaking before, but this is the first time I'll be doing something I actually want to talk about.
It is good fun, I must admit.
Yeah.
And like you said, we have got some really fantastic speakers. We had some fantastic ones last year, and interestingly, a lot of them are coming back this year. So it must have been okay, mustn't it?
Yeah.
For them to come back.
Well, I'm a bit intimidated because I know there are several people flying in from abroad to hear me. So as long as they don't ask for the fare back, I'll be all right, guys.
Oh, that's no pressure then. Are they supporters of your podcast then?
Yeah, because I do mine, but I also co-host a transatlantic one with Brennan Storr called the Ghost Story Guys, and I've been doing that since the beginning of 2021 because I just thought I needed more things to do in my spare time, you know.
Yeah. It's good fun though, isn't it?
Oh yeah, brilliant.
So will you have a PowerPoint presentation and all this and lots of notes? Or
yes.
Or are you going to be like me and just turn up and stand up and blab on?
Well, you did have a presentation last time. That was good.
I'm hopefully going to be using some sort of additional aids. So if people get bored of listening to me, at least they've got something interesting to look at.
So if anyone watching has got any questions for Paul, just put them in the comments and we'll read them out to him. There's a few people watching. We normally do these live shows on a Tuesday, so this is new territory for us.
Yeah, on a Thursday.
But we were talking for weeks and weeks about sort of chatting to all the ParaMeet speakers, and I didn't realise how quick it's coming up, to be honest. We haven't got time to speak to them all once a week, so we've got to do 2 a week.
Hey, no problem. I'm always quite flexible, so as long as you give me a week's notice, I can usually move to anything to fit in.
Yeah,
so
it's coming up really quick, though. I must admit, it's a bit scary.
Yeah.
Well, I'm already thinking that it's just under 2 months away, and already, I think I've got one spare weekend left now in September.
Yeah.
So it's come around very quick.
Yeah, very busy then.
So well, it's a good thing.
Yeah, what got you interested in this sort of field then?
I suppose I was a lapsed believer, shall we say, for the best part of 20 years. I was very fortunate. My grandmother was a White Witch and was an associate of Doris Stokes, though I didn't know who the heck they were when I was 6 years old. So I was kind of brought up with a very sort of split family where half were very spiritual and into magic and the supernatural and belief, and the other half were science-based. So it's kind of given me a rational belief system that I can adapt depending on the circumstances. And I grew up in a haunted vicarage that we grew up in our first home as a family, which all kicked off. It was fairly creepy house anyway. But it all kicked off when my stepfather was doing some gardening, and we discovered a grave in the front garden about just under about a foot from the top. And it was we had the gravestone and the coffin and things of a 6-month-old child that had been buried there, because it was literally straight across the road from the church. So the graveyard was 20 yards away from where we lived. And things got a bit interesting after that. It wasn't malicious. It was mischievous and interesting, and had a water, as ghosts sometimes do, seemed to be very obsessed with water. And so we lived there till I was about 7 or 8.
Yeah.
And then we moved after that. And as we moved, my auntie was a licensee who worked around sort of Cheshire and the Northwest. And as we moved out of our haunted house, she took over a pub that had a poltergeist. So basically, until I was about 14, we just had family houses that were haunted. So you couldn't help but not get interested in the subject, really.
Yeah. Okay, Lynn's made a comment. She says, I think the talk on pets would be good. A lot of people focus on humans and the paranormal, not so much is said about pets and animals.
Oh, sorry, Neil, I didn't mean to speak over you.
That's okay, you carry on.
I mean, it's a fascination for me, because I've long heard of stories of people who have had encounters, or they hear departed pets that come back to visit them at certain times. I mean, my mum, one of her dogs would come back and she could hear his chain rattling on his bowl. But and she got another dog, but there was no chain on the dog, so there was a rattling and other people heard it. So and I've met people over the years who've had encounters where they've been in bed and they felt their former cat jump on the bed, or dogs or whatever. So I just find it very interesting because of that emotional connection that people have, that when you lose a pet, it is, a very deep and dark grief that can overcome you, which is quite different to how you would feel if you lose a relative or a dear friend or a partner or something. So it's an interesting dynamic for me, that it gives these kinds of conflicts that some people just don't seem to value this. And yet, if you look at the ghostly history of England, for example, there are hundreds of examples of ghostly horses being seen. So why would it only be horses?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is that strong emotional tie between humans and pets, though, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, it is like losing one of your family, isn't it? Because when you've had a pet for, say, 12, 14, 16 years, it is like losing one of your family, because they are your family. They live with you day in, day out, and they're part of your family. And it is really sad when you lose them, and you do miss them terribly. I mean, I have quite a few experiences of my pets that have passed on, and there's still one in particular, my dog called Dulcie, and I had her for years. And when she went, she was around for a long, long time, and she's still around now. I could feel her getting on the bed, and I could, like you, I could hear a collar hitting the bowl and stuff like that, and I'd see a reflection in the glass, even though she wasn't there. There's lots of it is a fascinating subject.
And let's face it, the pets are better behaved than the kids. Talking from experience here. The healthy pup, or alias Biff, says, sorry, late for the party, detention for me again. Yes, Biff. Like you then must have been shopping or something then, Bear. Kerry says, hey, just wondered, I have an irrational fear of being near water in a moving vehicle. Never had an accident, etc. Could this be from a past life?
Quite possibly.
Do you have any experiences from past lives at all, Paul?
It's not really a subject I've delved into, to be honest. I'm obviously aware of some of the things and seen some of the research, but I'd be fluffing myself up if I said, oh yeah, I could dive into that. Well, not, pardon the pun, dive into that particular subject and offer some kind of explanation. But from what I've heard, and other people that I've spoken to have far more experience in that particular subject, there does seem to be sometimes this kind of irrational fears that people have, that have come from no reason. I mean, I know somebody that had a sort of surprise exorcism, shall we say, on outside a coffee shop in Canada. And after that had happened, they suddenly discovered that they were afraid of heights, which they'd never experienced, because they'd been to the Grand Canyon about 2 years before this particular incident and done the Skywalk, where you can walk out and above it and go out into the canyon itself, which is on one of those glass bottom bridges. And then they went back 2 years after it happened, and they couldn't even set foot on the bridge. They were terrified.
I must admit, I couldn't do that.
I don't know. I'd like the opportunity to have a go.
No. I spend looking out the bedroom window for me. I hate heights.
You have to try one of those that they've got in China, Neil, that pretends to brake. Have you seen those?
I've seen them on YouTube and things. That's horrendous, isn't they?
Yeah.
You put your foot down, it looks like it's cracking.
Yeah.
No. Not a cat and mouse chance. I have a fear of the water, of the sea, you know.
Yeah.
And it's a stupid fear. Up until, I think it was 1973. Can you remember the Jaws, the film?
Yes, one of my
I went
favourites.
to see that at the cinema. And that actually terrified me. I was about 12, 13 at the time. That terrified me. And I've not been in the sea since. And it's even that bad. I wouldn't go in the swimming pool.
No wonder you wouldn't put your wooden smugglers to Skeggy Beach.
No. I put my toes in it. That's as far as I go.
No. Think of the gold medals you could have won, Neil.
I hate it. And people, the kids say, yours couldn't affect you that much because it's a bit of a lame film now, isn't it?
I think it's the worst bit is when the head falls out the boat, isn't it?
Oh,
under the water.
That terrified me.
Yeah, that was the scariest bit, I think, when we were kids. But...
Yeah. Well, I'm not that bad. I think when you're out in the sea, I think that's quite a rational fear, because if God forbid anything goes awry, then you're kind of up the creek without a paddle, aren't you? Really, if you sort of, you see some of those cruise ships that have got into difficulties, like on Antarctic cruises and things, and they're like 2,000 miles from help, and you just think, no, that's not for me.
You won't get me on a cruise or anything.
Yeah.
Plus, yeah. I'm going off on a tangent again. Obviously, I know I always do. On a cruise ship, there's too many people in a confined space to me.
Yeah, one of them cruise ships, there's like 9,000 people or something
on the same boat.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a big boat, but
they are. Well, they're like floating cities, aren't they? They're just crazy, and they're like 6 levels, and you've got like sort of gym routes and jogging lanes and all sorts on modern ones. So it's crazy, isn't it?
So, do you do ghost hunts or paranormal investigations or anything like that?
I've really started getting back out there. I moved house a couple of years ago in Sheffield and moved to an area that I knew about it and been here, but I didn't realise just how spooky it was where I lived. My local park has a history of white lady sightings that happened at the end of the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. And then we've also got a shuck that hangs around on the wonderfully named lane Bunting Nook. So we've got that, and we've got all kinds of strange, ghostly airplanes flying over the peaks and things. So I've got a real appetite for getting back out there and chasing things down and looking at things. And I'm looking forward to seeing if anything turns up when we're doing the ParaMeet as well, Neil. So I'm getting a real appetite for it again, because I suppose it's kind of the next thing for me that I really want to sort of go and do. I mean, I've always gone and visited haunted locations. I'm a member of English Heritage, which is a brilliant way of going to see some wonderful historic locations with the off chance of stumbling across a ghost or two.
Yeah. Okay. Lynn says, I missed the intro. Can you do a recap on what your background specialist subject is, please? So have a recap, Paul.
Yeah, of course. So I am the host and creator of the Mysteries and Monsters podcast, which has been running for 4.5 years. I speak with some of the most well-known investigators and researchers and experiencers on a variety of topics from around the world, from the paranormal to ufology to alien experiences to ghost hunters. So it's a worldwide phenomenon on a variety of topics, and my love of these subjects has continued to develop since I started it.
That's good, and that's Paul's background. So, is there anything that really scares you, really frightens you? It's paranormal.
And that's paranormal. Oh, right. To be honest, I wouldn't say I'm not one of those people who thinks they're fearless, because I think if you've never experienced a certain type of phenomenon, you can't really say how you're going to react to it. But I'm pretty good with most. Like I say, I've had some experiences with ghosts and seeing strange things, so they tend to surprise and inspire me, and I get awestruck more than anything than fear. Though I seem to have worked my my phobia of dolls. I used to, even before I was aware of how many haunted dolls there are around in the world. I seem to, I think, like you were saying about your fear of water based on Jaws, I really didn't like clown dolls after Poltergeist. Yeah. Because I love horror films as well. So my parents were very open-minded, so they used to fuel my love of the paranormal with books, and they would let me watch scary films. And Poltergeist, I remember, is one of the few films at that era that I actually was very scared after watching it. And I watched it at sort of 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning in the daylight, and I was still frightened. So, yeah, I'm not too sure. I'm so far, touch wood, you know, I would say I've had a couple of hair-raising experiences in my younger days when we used to do regular Ouija sessions. Primarily because there were a couple of conversations that have stuck with me for the best part of 35 years. And the majority of it was just babble and nonsense and, you know, your friends mucking about. But there was a couple that were really creepy that sort of really made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up when I had hair. And so it was a bit, it put me out. There was one particular occasion we were doing it, and we got talking to this chap, and he took a shine to one of my friends who was doing the session with us. And this chap said that he drowned on holiday with his friends and his partner in Lake Windermere. And he was really upset because his partner had run off with his best friend after he'd passed away, and he wanted to come back and possess my friend so he could then find them and kill them.
Blimey.
And so we tried our best to end that session, and it took nearly an hour because whoever it was did not want to good night and God bless at all.
Okay, Kerry says Texas Chainsaw Massacre scared me for life. You're talking to two people who don't watch horror films. We work in a haunted building with haunted objects, but we don't watch horror films. Yeah. Neither of us.
And you could put me in a abandoned room with just be torch in the middle of the night in a house that's in the middle of nowhere, and I'll be fine. But both don't watch horror movies.
My wife Julie loves them. She'll sit and watch them. But, I won't. But then when I was 16, I think, when The Exorcist first came out, perhaps I was a bit younger. The Exorcist came out. When it first came out, the priests were outside the cinemas. They really were outside the cinemas saying, "Don't go in. It's work of the devil," and all that. And I did go and see that, and that's terrified me. To make matters worse, I had to, after the film finished, I had to walk back home down the lanes, and it was about 3 miles down the lanes, pitch black. Perhaps that's why I'm a bit mental.
Mental.
Yeah. Well, I think it is one of those things. There's something strange about you can walk down somewhere with no issues, 10 times a day. But as soon as it turns dark, it's like there's a whole new
It's different.
veil has been dropped across it, and everything seems a bit stranger, and you seem a bit more attentive. And those noises that you hear at 3 o'clock in the afternoon don't sound so interesting at 1 a.m.
Yeah. I know The Exorcist was awful. I don't think I've ever seen it since. I know Julie has, my wife. But I imagine that's a bit lame now, The Exorcist, compared to the films nowadays.
Oh, well, at least it's got a script.
Yeah, I don't like horror films. So there's no more questions. You got a question, Jane?
Yeah, I'd like to go back to the cryptid side of things, because you've done some work with cryptids, and I'm quite interested in that, because where do you think sort of these cryptids sort of evolved from? Do you think it was perhaps the Neanderthals, because I recently learned about this young girl that they found in caves, and she was a Neanderthal. They've dated her to be sort of 30,000 years old. And she was only a young infant, and they found her. She was so well preserved that her DNA was still usable. So they've sort of compared them to our species now, and we are not related. So it's sort of, the Darwin theory of us evolving over time is just not credible anymore. And I'm just interested in, where do you think sort of the cryptids have come down through the sort of evolutionary chain, because we are not the descendants of the Neanderthals and that, but I'm sure I read somewhere that the Bigfoots and they are the sort of descendants maybe of the Neanderthals. So what's your thoughts on that?
One of the episodes I did, probably I don't know, 3 years ago, I spoke with a guy called Michael Hanks, who's a very well-known American researcher. And we were talking about the Bigfoot enigma, primarily because we were saying that it seems to be one of those things that there is an incredible fossil record for giant apes all around the world. But because they're not as sexy or as interesting as dinosaurs are, most people don't pay much attention to them, and so you've got, like the for a lot of people, they believe that these giant hairy creatures, those that believe that they're flesh and blood, of course, that they are the descendants of the species known as Gigantopithecus, which was a 10 to 12 foot member of the ape family that was sort of pretty well spread throughout Asia and Europe. But is supposed to have died out between 10 and 50,000 years ago. And you've got other such large apes as Kenyapithecus as well, which I think died out about 150,000. These were all giant apes that stood between 8 to 14 feet tall, and they're on every continent apart from Antarctica. So you've always got that kind of lineage to fall back on as well, if you go in the regards that, could these be a remnant species? Because anybody that has an interest in cryptozoology will always point to the discovery of the coelacanth, which was the fish that was allegedly extinct for 65 million years ago. Been extinct for 65 million years until it was discovered by some European scientists on a trip to Madagascar in 1938, I believe. And that's essentially a swimming dinosaur. So when you discover things like that, if you find one, it would suggest that surely that can't be the only one. And we know obviously a lot more about breeding and our history and our descendants and the way we've moved in the last 40 years from what I knew when I was growing up at school about, Neanderthals all died out. And now obviously the train of thought from a lot of people is that we crossbred, because there are some people that do carry Neanderthal DNA. So that must have come from somewhere. And then you only look at, the Homo floresiensis that was discovered 20 years ago nearly now, which is these race of hairy hobbits in the Pacific. So some people would say that would suggest that they look a little bit like trolls or something like that. So we didn't know anything about that. You've got species like the Denisovans, who were another ancient early human that nobody knew about 30 years ago. So the old ways of how things used to be 30, 40 years ago, these days are completely incorrect. It's amazing how quickly things have changed, even in my lifetime. So God knows where we'll be in 50 years.
Scary, isn't it? Okay.
It is.
Biff says, I think he swallowed a dictionary here. What do you think to the theory that Bigfoot is just a ghost of the likes of
Gigantopithecus.
Yeah, that's the word. Glad you said that, Paul.
That's quite all right. I have to say that I've got time for this idea, because obviously there are reports of people encountering these large creatures, and they're bulletproof, or they vanish in front of people's eyes. And obviously, if we're talking, as we were discussing earlier with yourselves, about the ghosts of pets and animals, well, why can't they be ghosts? And it's interesting that when we talk about Bigfoot, you have people who believe it's a flesh and blood creature.
Mm-hmm.
You have people that believe it's an alien. You have people that think it has come from an alternate dimension or reality. You have people that think everybody that's encountered this can't recognize what a bear looks like. Or you have the possibility of, are some of these creatures ghosts, which nobody seems to be wanting to discuss. It's almost as if the cryptids and the ufologists who have decided their Bigfoot explanation, there's a little gap in the middle, and nobody wants to cross over, because they have such entrenched value that they would rather believe that Bigfoot is an alien that's traveled millions of light years to come to Earth, than the possibility of it could be the ghost of a relic ancient ape, which I find a far more plausible explanation than to think Bigfoots can fly flying saucers.
What do you think, James?
I think it's really interesting, because they have found that on meteors and things that come, that are coming from outside of this planet, that they do have life on them, and they think that one of the theories is that life may have started on this planet through life that's coming from an asteroid or a comet or something like that that's landed. So there's lots of different theories out there, isn't there? So it could be that something did come in on a perhaps something from outer space where it's evolved into something like that.
Well,
I mean,
a bit like the film Evolution.
A bit like what?
Film Evolution.
What
You've
film?
never seen it, have you?
No.
No. It's a film where an asteroid lands on the Earth. It's quite a comedy film. It lands on Earth, and it's got life forms on it, and it breathes and evolves really quick.
Yeah, because octopuses are supposed to be thousands and thousands of years old, and they think that they're one of the, because they're supposed to be like an alien life form, aren't they?
Oh, I don't
so, one of the theories is that sort of came in on a meteor sort of thing, and it landed in the sea, and that's where life sort of started. So it's all interesting stuff.
Yeah. Panspermia, it's called, that theory.
All right. Learn something every week. I did not know that.
Yeah, I have to say, I've got a lot of time for that particular. That's another thing, as we've just been saying about the lineage of human ancestors. Panspermia is something that over the same period, the last 40 years, has gone from being sort of a fringe subject to something that is widely discussed in scientific circles these days, which is the fact, as James just was saying, that meteors have hit the Earth and had the building blocks of DNA included in them, and that is possibly what kick-started evolution on Earth. Why not? For all we know, we could be Martians.
Could well be.
Yeah. Because we are different. We are a different species from the the sort of the theory of from Darwin, and because of the change in our chromosomes. Chromosome 2 has been fiddled around with, so we're to make us that different.
So we've all been fiddled around with.
We 95% of our DNA is the same as the apes, but that last 5% where chromosome 2 and chromosome 7, there's differences there that have some.
Yeah.
The theory is some master geneticist
Yes.
Has fiddled around with our DNA to make us who we are now. And we've been around for 200,000 years. As we are. We've not evolved because the systems in our body, which means we can't evolve, like our blood clotting systems and the systems in our eyes and all that sort of thing. It all needed to be working instantly straight away, otherwise we'd have never survived.
Yeah. Okay, Biff says, today's science fiction is tomorrow's science fact, which is right. Then he says, there are life forms living, he says leaving, I'm thinking means living on the edge of volcanoes in 100 plus degrees centigrade heat that you can put in a microwave and still live. But a decade ago, we didn't know that. So who knows what life is possible?
Yeah. The species of crab that live on underwater volcanoes where the temperature of the water is 400 degrees.
Yeah. They have their own little ecosystems, don't they, around these heat spots in the water.
It attracts them. It's like why manatees like nuclear power plants. It's one of those weird things about nature. They like to hang around nuclear power plants because the water cooling system flushes all the water out and it's warmed up because it's been in the reactive core, and so manatees like to hang about in that because it's the perfect temperature for them.
Strange. I think it's a shame that the people who are interested in UFOs don't cross over to the ghosty side of the paranormal. I think that's a shame. Probably works the other way around as well.
Yeah, but we are very good at putting everything in a box, aren't we?
We are.
And we're not very good at cross-matching things over into different things.
Yeah, I wish I had that problem. I just like all of it.
Way, and people look at us gone out, when we say about aliens and ghosts, and to us, it's all interlinked. UFOs and cryptids and ghosts, and the Fae. It's all the same. It's all interlinked to us.
Well, certain legendary researchers have surmised that is this some kind of great big cosmic joke. Keel and Jacques Vallée have both sort of put forward the ideas that everything is linked and it's all some great big cosmic joke. Who's responsible, nobody knows. But for me, I've been very interested in all aspects of it. So I've always had an interest in all of it. There are some topics I prefer to others, and there are some things that keep my interest a little bit more. But if anything, since doing the show, I've kind of rediscovered my love of topics that, ufology I'd kind of really got bored of by the end of the 90s. Now I'm really interested in it, which is probably good timing with everything that's going on in the US at the moment.
Do you think social media has helped with that? Because so many more people have because people have got their phones and things, so much more footage has been captured, so much more sort of evidence and information has been able to sort of be collated through the internet and through social media and sites. Do you think that's helped?
I certainly do. I think it's certainly had a lot to do with the rebirth of folklore in the modern era, which is something that has come from being hardly spoken about in the 90s, other than a sort of a few real believers in the subject. You only have to look at the Fae as a subject. I would suggest that 30 years ago, a lot of people thought it was a very twee and old-fashioned superstitious subject, whereas now you have some amazing researchers and outlets out there for people to discuss encounters with such creatures, which 20 years ago nobody would be doing it. And you could probably say it's had a lot to do with the rebirth of Wicca in the modern era, that it's found itself able to transform itself into something that's really caught fire on social media across the world, where I think it just allows the weirdos like we were growing up, who perhaps were the only weird kid on our street or in our class. We now know that we weren't the only weirdos. There's lots and lots of us out there. And the internet has allowed us to meet each other and be weird together, which is a wonderful thing, which is one of the great things about the internet. There's a lot of bad things, but that certainly is something. So I agree, Jane. I think it's had a lot to do with the promotion of it. And also it's given a lot of people a safe space to talk about experiences that in past they would have been told they were imagining in it, or they just bottle it up and cause themselves internal trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah. A few more comments then. Biff says, don't catfish in Europe like living near nuclear power plants, water outlets, which is similar to what you said. Lynn says, it's interesting how people believe in ghosts, but not the Fae or aliens. That's a good point. Biff says, you say Bigfoot might be an alien, but wouldn't it be a good disguise?
I say some people think that. I don't.
And then he
However,
said, go on.
I was going to say, however, if we're talking about the possibility of life on other planets, who's to say there isn't a planet out there where there are big, tall, hairy people wandering about? They might not be coming here, but that's not to say something like that doesn't exist. You know, if you've got planets where it rains ice, liquid nitrogen, and, you know, meteors, then why can't you have a planet with hairy people on it?
Yeah.
And then Biff says, I liked it last ParaMeet when Kate Ray alluded to Bigfoot being part of the Fae. The big green man might be the big brown man. Yeah. Kate is coming back to this year's ParaMeet as well. So,
yeah.
Fantastic tour to Kate. She's coming on the show. It might be next week. I can't remember.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I could possibly say that we could back that up, because when we were in the woods doing our demon files, was it
I can't remember which one.
Carabia?
Carabia.
Was it? He sort of appeared more as like a tree man, didn't he? And he was very, very tall and very slender. He didn't sort of have the big sort of beefiness like you imagine a big, but similarities were very similar. So he could, you know, they could well be part of the Fae.
Yeah. Well, Bill says, we're not the weirdos. It's the one who call themselves normal are actually the weirdos. That's very true, Bill.
I like being weird, but I agree with what he's saying there. But I wear being weird as a badge of honor these days.
Yeah. I love being different. I do. How boring it is to be normal.
Oh, yeah. I can't think anything worse than, you know, me eating 2 veg every day, watching television until it's time to go to bed. Whereas I just will discover some weird thing to watch on YouTube that I've never seen before, probably.
Yeah. So do I. So what do you I'm going a bit negative now. What do you think to these keyboard warriors who sit behind the keyboard, causing lots of drama in the paranormal, or causing lots of criticisms,
judgments, and
how do you find? Have you ever come across any with your show? Or
I've had, you know, odd things. I've been accused of not being English and pretending and putting a voice on. You know, when you do something out there, I think you forget. You know, I've always been very sort of connected. I've been online for 25 years. I got the internet in sort of the mid to late 90s, and discovered the world of Art Bell at that point. So it's very interesting to see how this kind of trolling, negativity, skeptical, aggressive behavior goes on to the extent it does. And I think one of the reasons that a lot of organizations have done really well to sort of position themselves as safe spaces for subjects like this is to move away from these people who seem to go out of their way just to try and ridicule people for no, I mean, what kind of satisfaction would you get from that? It's very self-destructive, because if you're that angry all the time, it can't be good for your health.
It can't be.
No.
Can't be.
What's wrong with just letting people be? Just let somebody wants to go off and say, just do an investigation or whatever with just their K2 or whatever, or their, you know, with orbs and all that. So why not just let them do it? Just let them get on with it. And, you know, if they enjoy it and they don't bother anybody, just let them do it. And there seems to be a lot of this now where we just can't seem to just stand back and just let people do their thing without judgment and criticism and ridicule and all that sort of thing. It's gone crazy.
I think for a lot of people, it's either black or white, yes or no. Can't be. There's no grey area for a lot of people on both sides, though, as well. You know, there are some people who will accept any old nonsense, as you know, when we're talking about cryptids. If I see another alleged photo of Bigfoot that's got a big red ring in it on a tree, then you know, I'll probably get cataracts, I think. Squinting that much, but it is to whatever people want to do, and like I say, I think it's literally just an electronic extension of a playground bully, isn't it? They just go out of the way to look at somebody, and when it's anonymous and you've not got that emotion, you know, I've always worked on a principle: if you can't say it to somebody's face, don't type it, because half the time the people that type stuff would never dare say that to somebody's face, because they get probably a punch in the face.
It's sad. And Biff makes a good point here, actually. He says, here we are talking over the internet. Yeah, I think the internet may be one of the worst inventions for the detriment of the interaction of the human species.
Yeah, definitely.
I agree. The internet is amazing, but it's also evil, isn't it? It's also...
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It can be, it's a very dangerous thing in the wrong hands. And you only, you know, let's not pretend it was all flowers and green meadows when it finally started creeping into people's homes 20 years ago. There were always strange people out there ready. But I think often, as with anything, there's a lot of focus on how bad things are often, and we forget sometimes some of the great interactions we've had or the wonderful people we've met. I mean, there are people that I'm friends with and I have conversations with, or opportunities such as this, that if it wasn't for the internet, you know, what would we be doing?
Yeah, exactly.
Really?
Yeah, the internet is amazing. Like I said, it's amazing, but it's also
a double-edged sword, isn't it?
Of course it is.
Wild Bill says, I never say anything I won't say to one's face. That's the way to be.
Absolutely.
And he also says, I've been accused of pretending to be human. Then he says, remember, sometimes the truth does hurt. Yes, it does. But I just think, say what you think.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
Then still be mates afterwards.
Yeah.
Having different opinions, good though, isn't it? You know,
well, it is.
You have a difference of opinion. You say your piece, I say my piece, and just still be mates afterwards.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, cool. I think it's also, for some people, there's the fear of saying they don't know. Well, there's nothing wrong with saying you don't know. If you don't understand something or you don't know, people have to have an opinion, and I don't understand how we've gone to this point of where people are afraid to say they don't know. If I'm a big believer, because I'm a terrible liar, and I can't blag things I don't care about. So, like you said about past lives earlier on, I could have, thrown out some right nonsense.
Yeah, of course.
But I have to be honest. It's not something I know a lot about of, and I wouldn't wish to disrespect the person that asked my opinion by giving them fluff.
Yeah, best way. Lynn says, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to develop my interest in the paranormal to the extent that I have. It weren't for the internet and social media. Yeah, we agree. Social media is fantastic, but it just gets abused.
Yeah,
that's the problem. The internet's fantastic, but it gets abused, and the horrible people do abuse it. You know, you hear the teenagers hanging themselves because of social media. And I think there's something wrong with society as a whole, then, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, it's just these sad people who need to go out their way to bully people to make themselves better about their own non-existent and interesting dull lives, isn't it?
Yeah. Wild Bill says, Neil knows me. I say what I think. I'm not a baker. I sugarcoat nothing. I know you well, Bill. And then he says, I always tell people to be careful what they ask me. They might not be able to handle the truth. This is true. Some people can't handle the truth, can they?
No.
And Cliff says, social media has helped me gain many friends who are interested in the paranormal. Yeah, like I say, social media is fantastic, but I think it's a small minority, same as everything, and we know this too well.
Yeah.
A small minority in everything in life spoils it for the majority, don't they?
Of course they do, yeah. They usually shout the loudest as well.
Yeah, which is a shame.
Yeah.
But,
as my mum says, those with the least to say usually shout the loudest.
Yeah. We've only got a few minutes left. Do you think in the last few years, mankind's gone crazy.
Well, to be fair, everything in this country has been a bit odd for about 13 years, hasn't it? So, you know, it's just a concept. I don't know. I think it's one of those things that we're now so internationally entwined, as we said, whatever. You can literally go online now and find out about awful things in every part of the world to ruin your day, you know, doom scrolling and just reading awful things all the time. And I think sometimes you have to look at the perception of the world against the perception of the world through the eyes of the media. And I think often we are given a very disappointing and negative aspect to the world around us, because the people that benefit the most from people being afraid to leave their doors are the ones telling us to be afraid of leaving our doors. So, but yeah, there has been some very odd things happening. There are things that have happened in the last 5 years that I never thought I'd see. As a study, as a history student and lover of that and particular aspects of it, I specialised in early 20th century history, and so I spent a lot of time covering the Spanish flu. Which was of no benefit in 2020, because I thought there's no way everything they did wrong 100 years ago will happen again. And then you just sit back and go, oh, right, yeah, we didn't learn anything.
It must have been devastating as well, because it happened not long after the First World War, didn't it? The outbreak of the Spanish flu. And it happened just not long after the First World War. And it was just how people were coping and managing then during that time. You know, you've just come through 4 years of war, and then all of a sudden they get hit with this. And, you know, it must have been really, really a difficult time for families to just try and get through that.
Absolutely. Well, that was one of the reasons it was so virulent, was it actually started towards the end of the First World War. And it's one of those misnomers in history, because it didn't actually start in Spain. And the first outbreak wasn't Spanish, it was in an American hospital. And I can't remember, they decided to call it the Spanish flu because they didn't, but then people were getting it and feeling ill, and they didn't know if they got shell shock or it was just flu or whatever, because the first bit was the start of it. And because everybody was coming back from the First World War, and like you say, Jane, people hadn't seen each other for 4 years, people had lost their families, there was a lot of people were coming together, and therefore it was just a ticking time bomb. Everybody just wanted to be together again, and therefore it was an accident waiting to happen. And thankfully it was bad what happened with us 3 years ago, 2 years ago, whatever. But compared to what happened 100 years ago, I mean, I think the death toll they reckon was at least 80 million worldwide. So
okay, some more comments. Bill says, I thank the internet for meeting some great people like Neil and Jane. Thanks a lot, Bill. Cliff says, if negative comes along like drama, I just go straight past them. Bill says, gotta love the human race, laugh out loud. And then he says, I don't do drama. Says, media creates fear to control the masses. Bill says, history is a habit to repeat itself. And then Biff says, is history not taught enough because it's not there to be proud of, but to learn from our mistakes? Yet we make some mistakes over and over again. Well, I think they try to, especially modern times, they try and sugarcoat things. They don't teach the children the lessons they need to learn, like slavery, for example. You know, you can't not teach the children about. You got to teach the children about slavery so we don't do it again. If they don't get taught it, how do they know?
There ought to be a massive review in the education anyway, because they're still teaching stuff like Darwin's theory and stuff like that, and it's been proved to be not true. And none of the education stuff, we're teaching kids the wrong things, the wrong information. And it's, you know, there is a whole new human story out there, and it's just not being talked about, and it's just a shame, because, you know, we're just gurgitating out the same old stuff that's just not right.
Oh yeah, very much so. And I think that's an excellent point in regards to what we do teach. Because when I took history at college, loved it. I've still got a deep interest in history, which is one of those things that you kind of learn about as a secondary thing when you're into the paranormal anyway, because a lot of times you go into some wonderfully historic locations and you learn a bit. But I think it would have been far more beneficial for my generation to learn about slavery rather than trying to name how many kings and queens we'd had, which is completely irrelevant and means absolutely nothing. How many wives Henry VIII said. But we never talked about, we discussed the Industrial Revolution. At no point did we ever discuss any aspect of slavery whatsoever. We were just talking about Jethro Tull and the long walks and who invented what, and the George Stephenson and everything, and nobody mentioned anything to do with slavery at all.
Bill says the US history book is a joke. Biff says of slavery, how silly was it to tear down slave traders' statues? It's not there to be proud of, but to remind us not to make the same mistake.
Yeah. And one of the things about that is a lot of these people, even though they were slave traders and stuff like that, and they actually built the cities around that sort of trade, didn't they? And a lot of the universities were created sort of off the back of that financially, and all the bursaries and all the stuff like that, all the financial stuff that's still going on from the donations of these people. A lot of the students that were protesting against all this is how their education was being funded through bursaries and stuff, and they've got no idea about any of that.
Well, every port in the United Kingdom, a large part of its success during the 18th and 19th century was entirely down to the slave trade, which then was spread throughout the rest of the towns and the cities, like you say.
While Bill says Jethro Tull thick as a brick, let me show you age there, Bill. I got that album. Says, divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. That's my memory of history classics.
Top marks for Lynn there.
Then while Bill says slaves were sold into slavery by their own people, not by the white man. It's something. Things like slavery is, to me, is something that needs to be taught to our children.
And the truth, not just
the truth.
The whitewashed version to make everybody sort of feel good. Teach the truth,
not the PC version. But anyway, we always go off on a tangent on this show. Anyway, Paul,
keeping me on my toes, guys.
All the Egyptians had slaves, didn't they? The Romans had slaves.
Yeah.
How far back do you go with the story?
Yeah. Anyway, it's gone 9 o'clock. We're on overtime. She won't get paid overtime wages.
Double time, Jay.
Yeah.
Double time with one peanut.
And a biscuit.
Have a cup of tea. Thanks for coming on anyway tonight, Paul. It's been great meeting you because I've never met you before.
No, we've only spoken electronically. It's a pleasure. Thank you again for inviting me.
When you come to the ParaMeet, I might know who you are.
Likewise.
Look forward to meeting you in person. I think we can have some great chats about a lot of subjects.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. So, like I said, thank you again for the invite.
While Bill says they should also teach what happened to my people, the Native Americans.
Yeah, definitely.
See, that's not taught in America. It's not obviously not taught in our schools, but it's not. I imagine it's not taught in the American schools. They must be embarrassed by it.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I've just had an ice cream delivered. That's very good, isn't it?
Cool.
Where's ours?
Yeah.
I'll mention it. She's coming with me to ParaMeet, so you can take it over to her at that point. Neil.
I shall remember. Well, it's nice to meet you, Paul. Anyway, thanks for coming on. I'm looking forward to seeing you at the ParaMeet. I hope you're looking forward to coming. If it's half as good as last year, it's a fantastic meeting place for anybody who's weird like we are. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to it. And obviously, I'll be staying around for the Sunday as well. So I'm looking forward to everybody else's talks.
Yeah,
hopefully meeting a few people and getting to sort of shake hands and have a chat and a drink or two and meet many a like-minded soul. So I'm delighted to be there. Are you coming down on the Saturday or the Friday night? I'll be coming down the Friday. Okay.
There's quite a few of us staying in the hotel on the Friday night, so I reckon it's just going to be
Party. No.
a good laugh Friday night.
Yeah, I'll be easing myself into it. I'll probably have more fun Saturday night because I'll be able to have a proper drink then.
All right, so we're going to say goodnight. Thanks everyone for your comments and watching, obviously, and we'll see you all.
We'll see you all soon.
We'll see you all again Tuesday, I think. I can't remember who the guest is because I've got a memory like a sieve. And we'll see Paul in September. It's only a few weeks away.
So take care, everyone. Bye for now.
Okay, bye.